That's fine.
It's not a live stream unless something goes weird.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Bryan here, Jose, live streaming here on Friday for Food Safety Chat, and we're laughing about technical difficulties because 3 minutes before this started, my computer just died. It just went completely black. So I'm like, oh crap! So I had to quick restart my computer, and Jose's like, okay, what in the world do I do now? So luckily we made it back in time. So Food Safety Chat again. Wow. Okay. We do this every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain, 9 Central, 10 Eastern. And we, unlike webinars, we're doing a topic around food safety, and we're doing it interactively. And so part of this, right, is starting off with saying hello to everyone. So please, in the comments, let us know where you're from, where you're calling in. We've been really amazed by the people who call in and listen to this live stream and ask questions from all over the world. So sometimes I wonder with people over in Turkey or something like that, well, I guess it's afternoon for them. It's not too bad. But if you're on the other side of the planet, you're up awful early in the morning. So I am in Loveland, Colorado, which is
I'm in Miramar, in Florida.
Nice. And so how's the weather today? Nice. Decent.
Well, right now, Bryan, I can tell you that it's 72 already, and there is not even one cloud in the sky.
Wow. 10 in the morning. It's already 7. Crazy. Well, here in Colorado, let's see, it's 32 degrees at my house, so 0 C at 8 in the morning. But it's different here. Cold temperatures here are not as cold. I don't know if it has to do with the humidity in the air or whatever, but you in Colorado, unless you're used to really warm weather like you don't need much more than a light jacket. When you're in the sun, it's nice, it's warm, it's always nice.
Right.
Good morning, Rose from Tennessee. We got Vamala from New Jersey. Welcome, Tennessee. I've been thinking about my wife and I this summer, and once things settle down, is doing a vacation in Tennessee. I've been to Nashville and Memphis and took a class at the university over there. Beautiful. And so they have those cabins and stuff on the kind of the border between Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. They got those little resort areas in there. And so it's like you look online and like, these are really cool. It almost looks like Colorado. The mountains aren't as high, but it looks like Colorado. It's kind of cool.
Yep.
Very nice. So, one of the things that we always like to do when we start off with our chats is invite everybody. Morning, Stuart from Manchester. Wow, UK. I was supposed to go on a trip to the UK this last summer, but of course that didn't happen. We actually were going, my wife and I were going to see a concert. We were going to go to England and Scotland and see the Pet Shop Boys. So it'll happen sometime. But anyway, so the ritual here in the morning is for everyone to grab your favorite beverage. Jose loves his tea in his pretty cup. So everybody grab your favorite beverage. Yes. And join us. Makes everything better when you start the day off right.
Oh, yeah.
A good beverage is the way to do that. And I'm going to use that as a very clever segue into our topic, right? Which is we pick these things up, we trust them, right? I got my coffee here. I've got half and half. I just pour it in. I've got coffee beans from all over the world. I grind them up. I just assume that they're safe and no one has messed with it, right? And they haven't been adulterated with intentionally, right? Big topic. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And what's cool about the topic, Jose, is this was a request. We had someone who's watching this show, and I hope they're going to be able to make it here today, who actually requested that we do this topic of intentional adulteration and site security and kind of where that's at, because this has been kind of lagging behind in some ways with FSMA, but in other ways it's been around a long time with biosecurity, right?
Yeah. Yes, totally. Yeah. So the actual difference, Bryan, is that for basically many years, we have been working a lot in trying to identify hazards that are known that may happen in our operations, in our products, in our ingredients, and so on. But they may happen as an accident. It's
Mhm.
not that we are not aware that we need to control them, that we need to, mitigate or somehow do something to make sure that they are not going to cause illness or injury.
Yeah.
It's just an accident. But in this case, in our topic today, is intentional adulteration. So someone has the intention to do harm.
Right. Yeah. So kind of the classic example I remember from a number of years ago is there was a company in the Midwest that was making hams. Right? It's like the hams and things that you have for holidays and things like that. And an employee got in trouble with his boss and he got angry
Yeah.
and he decided, I'm going to get revenge. So he went to a piece of equipment in the process that he could get into and he looked around. Nobody was watching. He opened it up and he threw a bunch of nails into the process. And the nails got all ground up and metal fragments and got sent out with the ham, right? Intentional damage to the product.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you remember, I believe it was 2019, Brian. I'm not 100% sure, not 19 or 20, that in a farm in Australia, I don't know exactly where it was, but someone, again, a disgruntled employees, put a bunch of nails inside the strawberries.
I remember that. Yes, you know how you say it. You're right. And yeah, it's all about getting back, right? They're not thinking about us as the consumers, right? They're thinking about their boss.
Yes.
And it's like, all right, I'll
Yes.
show them, right? They think they can treat me that way. And so once, 9/11 and all these type of things, they really started looking at the food supply in the US and the government started looking at it and they started using tools from the Army. So Carver Shock, which is this giant abbreviation for how they look at things in the Army. And all right, what are some of the things that are risky? What are things that everybody eats? What are things that are easy to contaminate? And they came up with this big list. And in the dairy industry, of course, there was lots of concern in the dairy industry, different things that could be messed with. So they really started tamping those things down. And even to this day, right, there's certain things. If you get too close to buildings, right, so people chase you off now. So in Denver, there's an electrical power plant in Commerce City that if you drive around and you park there and you get out of your car, armed guards will come and make you leave because they don't want people, right? They don't want people taking pictures for biosecurity and all these type of things. So it's amazing on those type of things. And so I got that tested one time. I got chased off. That's how I know that personal experience. Actually, I had a car at the time. I was taking some pictures of the car. I love cars. And it was a really cool industrial background and these type of things. And me and a buddy were taking pictures and the guard came and chased us off because we were not allowed. Even though it was a public street, we were not allowed.
Yeah.
Good morning, Kimberly from Utah. Getting questions already. Awesome. Love it, guys. So here's what she wants to know, Jose. What kinds of background checks should a food company do on their leadership and frontline employees? Good question. What do you think?
Okay, so look at this, and this is something that is quite amazing, Brian. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story. So, in all of those almost 10 years doing SQF and FSSC audits, I have seen a lot. I'm not going to count, but I'm going to say a lot of food defense. And in the later years, just before retiring from performing third party audits, food fraud programs. Both of them are intentional.
Right.
And what I remember is that people is basically using USDA or FDA questionnaires. And I saw once a company using Carver Shock. Is not typical, but I saw one of those. And in general, you will see, okay, that's a good approach. But then with all these flying that I was doing, going different places for teaching and consulting and auditing, whatever, you can see everywhere in airports if you see something, say something.
Mhm.
And I said, well, but this is exactly what our intent in the food business. Anything that is weird, that's, seems like it's out of place, or someone that sounds like it's not, working for the company or something, that should be reported,
Mhm.
because that is exactly how we may control these intentional acts of potential adulteration of the product. It's intentionally someone that is likely, the most likely to do harm, and not necessarily to the company, to the consumers of the product.
Very true. And to Kimberly's question on that side, then too, it's you have to. This is why I think it's important to. You need to prepare your analysis first, right? You have to figure out what your vulnerabilities are, and we'll kind of back up a little bit here and go over that too. But let's say, for example, you have CFO at corporate and accountants working in those departments, and they get hired and things like that. Can they damage the company financially and embezzle money and things like that? Absolutely, right?
Yeah,
But is that a
yeah,
risk to the food? Probably not, right? Unless they're substituting and buying ingredients in the procurement group that they shouldn't be, right? And making money
yes,
on that, maybe, right? You need to look at those from a risk assessment standpoint. Now, like the ham example I gave earlier, that guy who has direct access to the product and he can go and put things in the product, absolutely, right? You need to understand who those people are. So as you build out your job descriptions and things like this,
yeah,
right, you may need criminal background checks and drug tests and these type of things to make sure that who is working those areas, you know who they are, and that if they have access, you need to understand that. So the answer, I think, Kimberly, is it depends, right? You need to know for those employees who's doing what, right? Now, the HR guys might complain about that and say, well, you're treating employees differently. Well, yeah, we are, right? Of course we are. They're different. We have to do that. So talk with the legal guys about that.
and the other thing, Bryan, is that, and now linking, you know, um, food defense, intentional adulteration, uh, disgruntled employees, and the food safety culture.
Mhm.
And there are still companies out there that they have punishment and penalizing employees and whatever. That is exactly the trigger that those individuals need in order to cause, the intentional adulteration of the products.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
why looking for penalizing people, or, you know, uh, kind of, I don't know, I will say penalizing people. I'm going to leave it like that.
Yeah.
And why not looking for ways to motivate people? And if
Mhm.
you cannot motivate people, well, okay, so bye bye, but you're trying your best, not trying something that is going to potentially cause a consequence that is not good for anyone.
Right. Part of any good program like this is to understand, you have to understand who your employees are and who are the troublemakers, right? I hate to say it, but every plant has a few
Yeah.
troublemakers and everybody knows who they are, right? Maybe that's just not a good fit for them. Maybe they aren't happy working there. But if those
Yeah.
people are going to do something, you don't want them around anywhere where they have access to that, right? So I'm kind of curious on your auditing side, and we'll get to Gustavo's question here in a second. One of the things I always taught my plants when we did our analysis for food defense was we didn't share that, right? We would let the auditors know that we have vulnerabilities and we've identified those vulnerabilities and we manage them, but I really don't want to show you what those are. What would you do if you were an auditor and you got that response?
I mean, that may depend, Brian, because we need to. I will need to see what is the context, what is a finished product, what is intended use, and so on. But for sure, there are many factors that will need to be part of this food safety, food defense program.
Right.
Uh, and one of the things that people normally do not I'm going to say do not use. And it's not because it's on purpose, it's because of a lack of a background, is the criminal mind setup. Okay. We are not criminals. So by default, it is very difficult to develop this program because we cannot think as criminals. We
True.
will need to think as criminals to make sure that we have controls in place that will make sure that we somehow catch those potential intentional actions that will cause the harm, the adulteration of the product.
That's a really good point. Really, really good point. Yeah, we have to get out of our own minds and think that if I was like that type of person, to the extent that we can, that what would they try and do? I like that. Put an underline under that one. Let's see. So Dr. Serrano had a comment here. What about harming the public by inaction? Most salmonella outbreaks are because of not using adequate cleaners and pesticides. I don't think we have whistleblower legislation of this kind of events. Well, so in the U.S., there was provisions under FSMA to protect whistleblowers and things like this. Inaction itself, yeah, I mean, that would be not intentional, right? So that would fall underneath the different sections of the laws and things like that, right? So if you didn't have a good food safety plan, right?
And I was typing a brief comment to Gustavo. Inaction is part of the accidental things because it means that someone, whomever designed the program, and especially when someone went through the hazard analysis, identifying the hazard and then identifying the proper control for that hazard is what we're supposed to do. Now, if someone that is supposed to be following a procedure and taking care of a hazard is not doing that, the inaction portion is when the hazard is going to happen. Well, that is potentially intentional, not doing something intentionally, but oh my goodness, most likely they are going to be not doing that as an accident because they are not aware, they do not fully understand whatever they are doing.
Gotcha. So
So
let's say,
most likely, I will say that is accidental, even though that someone on purpose may say, you know what, I'm not going to check the whatever the metal detector. I'm not going to check the cooking temperature, and I want to allow that to run. Well, if you intentionally are doing this and the equipment is working fine, even though that you are not collecting the data, monitoring the control point, the control procedure, maybe the process is still good, doing good. So again, I don't know exactly how I will analyze that situation.
well, I think it's a good example, and I'm glad we're teasing this out, right? Because it's so you have it depends on what the investigation finds out, right? So
Yes.
the intent of the person who is doing the act. So let's say under the food safety plan that pasteurization is a preventive control, and I'm the operator running the machine, and everything's going along smooth, and I get mad at my boss, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore, and so I quit monitoring the pasteurizer, and it goes out of whack, and it's producing product that's unsafe, right? And people get sick. And then through the investigation, it was like, okay, was the food safety plan inadequate? No, it was a good food safety plan. The guy who was the qualified individual who was managing it decided to intentionally damage the product, right? So then it would jump over that and go into the intentional adulteration side. So yeah, that's an interesting kind of thought experiment there, isn't
Kind
it?
of point. Yeah. And look at this, Brian. The training portion of any food safety system is the one that is somehow linked to this food safety culture. And when I'm always teaching these, about classes for food safety and food defense and preventive controls and so on, one of the things that I'm always telling people is that when I took my train the trainer, my instructor told me that when we are training, and that was the reason exactly of the class that I was taking, is to make me aware of all the different things about training people. So when we are training people, in order for us to make sure that we are effectively training people, so our training is going to work, we need to analyze three variables. The first one is the knowledge. And
Mhm.
in order for us to evaluate the knowledge, we normally ask questions or we give them a test or so on. And that's a way that we get evidence that they were knowledgeable. But the second variable is the skills.
Mhm.
And in order for you to determine if someone has the right skills, well, you will need to observe that people performing those activities. And that's how you can say, yes, I observed that person. And yeah, he or she was performing properly whatever activities were assigned to them.
Right. So
But there
theory.
is a,
Yeah. Yeah.
just one second. So having someone that has the right knowledge and you have the evidence, and having someone that has the right skills and you have the evidence, is going to make that person capable of performing. Okay. But still, what is requiring the regulation is the qualification. And people is not just qualified because they have the knowledge and they have the skills. People is qualified when they have the knowledge, when they have the skills, and when they have the third variable that I learned when I was taking my class, which is making sure that people have the right attitude. That
Mm.
attitude is exactly what is linked to the food safety culture and to the effective implementation of all of these procedures. Do you have the right attitude? Do you want to work for the company? Do you want to do your best? And yes, you can also track and measure that by checking if people is arriving on time, if they have kind of an attitude that is trying to help the company, trying to do the jobs the best way, trying to promote people in doing the best they can, and that kind of things. And that is something that can be measured, that can be observed.
Absolutely. One of the things I always used to teach my quality managers, and this applies to any manager with a team of people, is I would call it the 10-80-10 rule. And the numbers aren't quite right, but that doesn't really matter. So what I would say was in any particular task or role, 80% of the people are happy doing what they do. To your point, Jose, give them the tools, give them the training, help them to do those things well, and they're happy, right? They go home at night and they watch their kids play baseball and all is well. They enjoy working there and we give them the tools that they need. That's perfect. We love that. There's another 10% that help the operation improve and grow, right? These are the people who ask questions, who challenge the rules, who come up with better ways to do things. These are the people who need to be promoted and move to the next levels. And you need to help them do that and challenge them and
Yes.
help them grow. Because if you don't, they'll leave and go somewhere else where they can. Now, the reason I'm telling the story is the other side, right? And it's not 10%, it's 1% maybe, right? Of the people in the plant, to your point, Jose, who have bad attitudes, who like to fight with their coworkers, who show up late to work, all these things. And everybody in the plant knows who they are. And they're always
Yes.
there, right? And I would say to my managers, your job is to help that person find other opportunities that fit them better and make them happier, because it's not what they're doing here. And what they're doing is damaging other people as well. From an intentional adulteration standpoint, those people are the ones that you need to look out for, because they're the ones that will seek revenge.
Yep. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
So look at this, Brian. So once you have evidence that someone is knowledgeable, that has the right skills, and that has the right attitude, is when you are going to have someone that is qualified.
Yes.
Once you have qualified people, Brian, you're basically done. That is also an indication that there is a culture in that company, because they're
Mhm.
not looking just for someone that can do the job. They're looking for someone that has the right attitude towards the job. And by achieving that, you are naturally reducing the likelihood to have intentional adulteration, because the most likely source of any intentional adulteration is the employees of a company.
Yes, absolutely. And you bring up really good points here, right? It's there's two strong elements to this. It's just like your food safety plan. There's the documentation and the programs and the systems and all these things. But the other important piece of that is the people who do it, right?
Yeah.
You need to have both sides. So for food safety and intentional adulteration, because once again, like we talked about on this chat, is this all goes together, right? Is there was some provisions around intentional adulteration when it went into law on, okay, certain companies of this size need to do it by this point in time. That's all done, right? This applies to everybody now, right? You need to have these programs in place. And what are they looking for on these, right? You need, and this is 21 CFR 121.126. And what you need here is they're saying you need to have a plan, right? Now, what I want you to kind of think about as we're talking about intentional adulteration here and what FDA is looking for is think of the parallel with food safety, right? And what they want for your food safety plan. It's the same thing, right? They want a plan. They want you to go through and document and what is your process and all of these type of things associated with that plan. You need to then develop records for, to your point, Jose, training, right? So who is trained in intentional adulteration? What things are being monitored in the program? What are your records for this? And FDA is looking for very specific records, right? They want your assessment. They want your mitigation. It's like, okay, like the ham example. You've got this thing that opens up and people can easily go in there and throw stuff in. How are you controlling that? Are you putting a lock on it? Well, probably not. You need to get in there during manufacturing. Okay. Cameras. Do you have cameras that are watching that area? Training, attitude of the people, these type of things. How are you monitoring what you've identified as risks within your facility? What are those corrective actions and what are the verifications you're doing to make sure that those things are effective, right? Sounds like food safety plan to me, all the same. And FDA's got some pretty good documents out there on this. They've even got some tools for this as well. So if people are interested, my email's on here. You can reach out to me and I'll give you this information. They have a guidance document that was updated in March of 19, Jose, which is pretty good. It's long, but you can get through it. Also, I found they've updated the Food Defense Plan Builder. You can actually download a tool from FDA and use that tool to evaluate the risk in your facility. Now, one of the things I always tell my clients is anytime you can use the tools and the material that the government is giving us to do these things, do it because they understand it, right? And you'll be talking the same language as FDA. There's also a mitigation database that I found where you can look at the different steps in your process and they give you tips on things you should probably be looking at as you're building your plan. And then, of course, checklists, right, of what these different things are. So there's some good tools out there for that.
Yeah. And look at this, Bryan. You were talking, and I'm going to start addressing several of the topics you mentioned. So the first one, yes, the government is asking everybody. Yes, and for the government requirements, actually, I should start by saying that what is required for human food production under the FDA for food defense, which is not called food defense, it's called intentional adulteration, is not exactly the same as what is required by GFSI. So again, guys, watch out. Same conversation that we have in the past. The requirements in the law are in the regulations are not exactly the same thing as the requirements in GFSI, in SQF and BRC and FSSC and so on. So that's the first thing that you need to be very aware of. Read the requirements, understand what is required, and then proceed according to those requirements and develop your programs and your controls based on those requirements. That's number one. So number two is that, like you mentioned, Bryan, we are going to be using the same 7 principles. The same 7 principles of the HACCP approach, of the HACCP technique. Yes, they are the same. And there is, in my opinion, and I might be wrong, but in my opinion, people start creating these new acronyms, the threat assessment and critical control points, and the vulnerability assessment and critical control points. And now you have HACCP, and you also have TACCP and VASAP and whatever. But I mean, okay, so that's fine with me. But at the end, what we need to really understand is that the approach is the same. We need to perform a hazard analysis. We need to somehow identify a step of the process or an area of the process because we're going to take an approach more likely to the preventive controls and not to HACCP per se, the strict HACCP approach. We need to take a little bit wider approach, identify those instances where people can actually adulterate the products on purpose and then do something for that.
Right.
So part of the um, part of the definitions that we need to deal here is the definition of a threat, because it's not called a hazard, it's a threat.
Mhm.
So the definition of a threat, and that threat, by using the same hazard approach, we need to identify what is the severity, what is the likelihood. But because this is something that someone is going to be doing on purpose, intentionally, we may also need to use the detection. Can we detect if someone is going to do something? So the scoring now is going to include a third variable in our risk assessment. And it will be up to us to be, start reading and learning about these different methodologies and how we can include the detection into this risk assessment. So whatever is the risk that we identify, being high, medium, low, whatever you decide to have your matrix, then is when we need to determine if we are vulnerable to that threat or not.
Mhm.
Because it is possible that you may find a threat that is high risk, but we are not vulnerable to that threat. And on the other side, it is possible that we may have a medium or low risk of having that specific threat, but we are very vulnerable to that threat. And now we have included in our assessment not only a third variable for the risk, but we're also including the vulnerability.
Mhm.
And again, if we do not understand all of these issues, it is going to be very difficult for us to develop an effective program for food defense and intentional adulteration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the parallel here with your food safety plan and how you develop those, a good point here as well too, is you need to look at these things, and this is something that really damaged HACCP early on, is how reasonably likely is this to occur, right? Is Tom
Yeah.
Cruise going to parachute into the top of the building and go down and put something in the? No, no, I don't think that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So you always have to use that filter of common sense. So let's see here. We have a couple of questions here. So Stuart has a question. When a single product has more than one adulteration risk and you apply a risk matrix and each issue has a different score, how would you summarize the risk with mixed scores? What is your view on the best way to present those findings?
Okay, so maybe we do not know exactly what Stuart is thinking of, but I'm going to try to answer. Stuart, look at this. One of the things that I'm always saying when I'm teaching any of these classes, and especially talking about risk assessment and determination of the risk, is that we need to be aware of the source of that hazard.
Mhm.
Okay. Because we may have the same hazard from different sources. Okay. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we are receiving raw chicken. When we receive raw chicken, the typical hazard in chicken raw is salmonella. But
Mhm.
because they are the chicken portions are coming from a facility that is being washed with water, blah, 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 in lots of water everywhere, you can also put in your hazard analysis that you may have listeria coming in. Okay. Now you need to store that chicken in your own warehouse, and your cold storage is perfect conditions to have environmental listeria, because listeria may grow inside a cooler perfectly. Now, the listeria that grows in your cooler is not the same organism that the listeria that is coming with your chicken. Okay. And I'm in my classes, I'm always using this analogy. We all are Homo sapiens. That's our scientific name. Exactly the same as Listeria monocytogenes, for example. However, you and me and Bryan and everybody, looking and watching and hearing at this chat, we're not the same. We have different hair and different height, and I don't know, we're different. Well, same thing. The listeria that is coming with the chicken is not the same listeria that is living in your cold storage.
Mhm.
So which are the controls? Well, the controls depend on what is the source of the organism. So in order to control the listeria that is in your cooler, you have cleaning and sanitation that is based on your GMPs. And then to take care of the listeria that is coming with the chicken because it's raw and somehow a little bit should be there, you have a cooking process. So is the risk the same? I don't think so. That is the risk the same. So again, we will need to analyze what is the source of those hazards in order to determine what is the right risk and which will be the proper control.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. A good example for this too would be like building security, right? So we know in the facility that keeping everything shut for food defense is really important, right? And preventing people from
Yes.
coming in and doing bad things. But when we're doing our assessment for the intentional adulteration food defense plans, we find out that there's a door in the back that the employees like to prop open and they're going out and smoking, right? And nobody knew about it, right? So what's the risk now, right? Is it the door itself? No, it's the
No.
training, right? So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to put cameras on that? Are you going to post signs that say, hey, don't leave this door open? Are you going to do training sessions? Are you going to put in a lock that they can't open up? What are you going to do, right? So it all kind of then is going to be dependent upon what you find at that particular location, right? Because that open door brings in the potential for all kinds of different threats that you want to control, right? And one of the things that FDA has been known to do when they're going out and evaluating these programs is they'll try and get in your facility. They have done that.
Yes, yes, and you brought up a very good point. So you mentioned to have cameras, to put signs, uh, and whatever. I mean, you mentioned a few more other things. How effective are individually those control measures?
Mhm.
And I will say, well, yeah, you put a sign, and maybe someone that has been working in the company for the last 50 years, the sign was placed 2 days ago, and this person is used to, go out through that door. He's
Yeah,
going to still going out to that door. I don't care what kind of sign you put there. And you put a camera, and you're going to observe that person going out of the facility, leaving the door open because he's smoking outside.
right.
Now, what about if we put an alarm on that door? And as soon as you open that, the alarm, wait, wait, wait. Do you think that that is going to happen again? No.
Hopefully not.
So it's up to us to decide which are the best control measures.
Right. Well, and part of that then too is talking with the employees and saying, hey, this is why we're making sure this door is shut now,
Yeah.
right? We have threats.
Yes.
We have
Yep.
people. Look at these stories from the media where people get into the buildings and steal things or do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? We can't do this anymore, right? And hopefully that retraining works, right? But again, that's what the alarms and the cameras and all these things are for.
That is
Um,
correct.
let's see. So Raphael had a couple of comments here. Raphael, good to see you, my friend. Ola, I would not say to think as criminals, but gap analysis. HACCPs come from the hazard, right? What we're talking about when NASA developed this method, it was trying to see where the weak links were. When something's can happen, it will happen, right? Definitely, good observation. And as we're talking about pasteurization, right after and before, you have the CIP, right? So clean in place, acid, caustic water, all those things. And you have a huge excess of caustic and not final wash with water. A person with wrong attitude, faulty sensor, software, right? Something happened. So yeah, he's talking about methods for doing that. So poke yolk and all those good things. It is a support to operations. In such case, what would be the right preventive support to have a yellow light when there's something wrong? So that even if the person, oh, I lost the rest of the comment. Oops. Not quite sure what Raphael's asking here.
Yeah, Rafael is asking basically what will be the best control measure for that thing. So I will say I'm going to start with this, and maybe Rafael, we may not get into all the details, but look at this. When you train someone, remember that one of the variables that you need to measure is the skills. You do not train someone, which means giving them the knowledge and then release that person to work. The right approach is to coach that person. So now that that person has the knowledge, that person is going to be assigned to work with someone that has been working in that position for X amount of time. And now that person is going to start working together for a certain amount of time. The coach is the one that is going to sign saying, okay, this person can now be released and work alone. That is the right way to do it.
Yep, absolutely. One of the questions I love to ask when I was visiting my plants or doing audits was, okay, who's that guy over there? Well, that's Bill. Okay, well, what's Bill doing? He's running the pasteurizer. We'll keep on that example. Great. Is he trained? Yes. And then I'll say, how? How do you know he's trained? And just what you're talking about, Jose. They'll say, well, I gave him, he went to a PowerPoint thing, stuff like that. I'm like, show me the proof, right? And the thing I'm always looking for is that on the floor training. And I break it down into green, yellow, red. So green is someone is trained, right? They've been through the course material. And to your point, Jose, super important. Someone has observed them and has certified that they know what they're doing, right? They're competent, to your point. Yellow is they're under probation, right? They've gone through the material, but I am now observing them, right? To make sure that they're good. So they need to do that. And red is no, they're not allowed to do this. Another good example of this is forklifts, right? So with forklifts, right, you have to go through the training, and it's very rigorous and what's required and all these type of things. And there needs to be a period of observation. Well, now this guy runs into something and has a wreck. All right. Well, obviously we didn't do a good job training him. He was going too fast or whatever. He's back to yellow. He's under probation. He cannot operate that forklift without a supervisor there to observe his behavior to make sure he's doing it correctly. And red is no, forget it. This guy wrecked again. He's not allowed to drive forklifts anymore, right? Yeah. That's the job of the supervisors, right? The people who are directly responsible for the people performing functions, they're the real guardians of everything that we're talking about here today.
Yes.
Everything.
Yep, exactly right. And actually, you have a very good point, because if we go to the regulation to 21 CFR 117, and most likely, even though that I'm going to say just by the intention and not because I remember exactly from the regulation, the intentional adulteration regulation, the supervisors, which is just a generic name to call anyone that is responsible for the effective execution of all of the GNPs and everything that is under the food safety plan. This could be a manager. This could be a vice president. This supervisor under regulatory terms. And anyone that is managing other people's actions is responsible for the effective implementation of all of these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Any other questions from people? By the way, Jill, hello. Nice to see you here. Jill's awesome. So if anybody's got any other questions, this is the time. We're getting ready here to wrap up. So really, I mean, Jose, because we're jumping between different things and different things that people are doing, right? They're probably like, whoa, tons going on here. What do I need to do, right? So in particular, we were talking here about intentional adulteration, and then your plan, your defense activities associated with that, right? So you need to have a plan, a written plan, right? So you can use FDA's Food Defense Plan Builder. There's different tools that you can use. You can hire consultants to come in to help you evaluate and create a plan, right? You need to then train people to that plan once you identify those risks. And you need to have records, right? So once again, just like everything else in quality, in any good plant operation, it all comes back to PDCA, right? Plan, do, check, act, right? It's the same thing here, exactly the same. What is your plan? How are you executing it? How did you check that plan to make sure it's going the way you think it's going? And if you find mistakes, what are you doing to bring that back on course? Right?
Yeah.
So with FDA, again, then they've got those tools out there, the guidance document, the food safety plan builder, that mitigation database, and the checklist of what you need to have in place. Go through those things and just do that, right? Odds are you've probably done this in your locations in the plants in the past. Now is the perfect time to dust all of that off and redo it.
Yeah. I mean, I believe that after I will start, Bryan, by saying that anyone that is looking to develop a very effective food safety plan, I'm going to call it food safety plan. I'm not necessarily call that an intentional adulteration program. We'll need to read all the requirements of the FDA, of the FSIS, assuming that you are a processing facility working with meat and poultry and egg products, even though that the requirements are, quite similar in intention, there are a little bit of a differences between one agency and the other one. So make sure that you read those requirements, understand what is applicable to you, and then read, if you are following any of the GFSI schemes, read the requirement, the specific requirements for that scheme, and then is when you can start developing your food defense program. So for your food defense program, and I'm going to use the same principles, you will need to identify threats. You will need to analyze the risk of that threat. You will need to make sure that you somehow have a procedure to determine if you are vulnerable to that threat, that you know that is the risk. You already evaluated the risk, but you need to determine if you're vulnerable to that specific hazard, and if the combination between risk and vulnerability, I'm going to say, requires you to set up a control measure, and I'm using this now the same language as in HACCP. What you can do is to use the Food Defense Plan Builder that Bryan was mentioning, or go online to the database, the FDA database, for all of these control measures that they have, and try to see if you can match
Mhm.
something that is quite similar to the hazard that you have, and then make sure that you implement, which is execute, that control measure, and keep the records to show that you somehow are reducing or mitigating the threat by doing something.
Right. Absolutely. And I'm gonna close on this then too, right? So part of this, just like your food safety plan, is that you need to have a team who's managing this, right? And you need to have someone who's responsible, right? Does that mean that's a quality manager? No, right? It could be the HR manager, it could be the safety manager, it could be the plant manager. There needs to be someone who's overseeing the program. So just like in FSMA, right, where you have your preventive control qualified individual who's kind of overseeing the program and helping to manage it and all these type of things. Back again, this all comes full circle, right? It's about the people, right? So you need to have the right team in place who's going out and evaluating this and has ownership and has leadership that is then reporting up to the organization. So senior leadership understands what these things are within the facilities and how they need to be controlled. Because a lot of times with the intentional adulteration and food defense and these type of things, there's money, right? Let's say that you need to build a fence, right? Ooh, not cheap building a fence, right? So a lot of times there's capital that's required for some of these improvements, right? Cameras, new door alarms, all these type of
Yeah.
things. And senior leadership needs to understand the justification for this money, right? So again, it's why it's really important to have a good plan.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Great questions, guys. Awesome topic. Again, every Friday, Jose and I are here. And so 8 o'clock Mountain, 10 o'clock Eastern on Fridays, we do this live stream. And we want to help everyone with these topics, right? Because sometimes it just helps hearing people work through these to give you the ideas that you need to make your plans better or build a plan, right? So we also want topics. What is it that you would like to hear from us? This is not a webinar, right? This is us helping you work through these things, and we really enjoy this. So please, our emails are on here. Reach out to us and tell us, what would you like us to talk about on these live streams? Yeah. And we'll fit it in and hopefully be able to talk about that. So kind of all I had. Jose, you got anything else?
I believe that we pretty much cover everything about intentional adulteration.
I think so too. So again, everybody, thanks for all your questions and comments. It makes this much more enjoyable when everybody's engaged. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it. And we will see you next Friday. Thank you, Jose. Great again.
Thank you. Bye. It's a pleasure. See you soon.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yep.